Hello, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar titled Operational Junos. Please note that all participants are in listen-only mode, but feel free to type your questions into the Q&A pod at any time during today's presentation to be addressed by the presenter during the Q&A session at the end. I would now like to hand the call over to today's presenter, Julian Eccli, a systems engineer for Juniper Networks. Julian, you now have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Julian Eccli. I am a systems engineer tech lead at Juniper Networks. I work on the West Coast out of their Silicon Valley region. I've been dealing with Junos for about 12 years now. And today I'm going to go over basically operational Junos. It's more of an introduction to operational Junos, ifs, ands, do's, whats, etc. Kind of a lot of those tips and tricks that you may or may not be aware of. And we can also have a Q&A after that. And we're also going to go ahead and give away some books. So let's get started. Okay. So the agenda, we're going to initially go over some of the onboard help, navigating the command line interface, configuration management, and some tools. There's also a follow-on. We're going to go over automation as well. So onboard help. One of the things that Junos has is all the manuals that you would normally have available externally are also available within Junos itself. You can just use help question mark. We'll provide a whole slew of stuff. You have help reference as shown here. It's just a help reference ISIS priority. One of the ways you can navigate this is to go ahead and just do the question mark. So help reference question mark. We'll go ahead and show you what's going on. If you're not sure what you want to find, you can do help or propos. It's similar to the Unix or propos command where it searches through everything. It'll go ahead and give you a big listing of what's going on there. And from that standpoint, you can go ahead and navigate the hierarchy that way from the help command structure. If you look here for the sample output, it's an example of what you would see when you use the help. By the way, this deck was originally built to be interactive more with someone driving off of the Junos box itself. So if you happen to have access to one, I highly encourage that you go ahead and just try these commands out for yourself while we go along and do this presentation. So it also has help topic, just another form of the help. It's just different in this case. If you go back here, you'll go ahead and see the reference. It'll show you the different, the syntax, where the hierarchy levels, et cetera, are. While the topic actually goes ahead and explains it in more detail. So anytime you aren't sure what's going on, go ahead and use the help. It'll go ahead and allow you to interactively see what's, it'll allow you, instead of having to go out to the web, have to go out and pull out books, you can go ahead and just search directly from the Junos device itself. The command structure. So the way Junos is structured is it's hierarchical. You have, from a configuration standpoint, as well as a CLI standpoint, you have your top level nodes, second level nodes, third level nodes, etc. Let's see, let's get to some examples here. All right. So from a summary of moving up in between these levels, you have edit, up, top, exit, etc. Looking here, some of these examples. So if you want to get into configuration mode, there's two ways to do this. You can use configuration. So I actually have a question right now from Tamaz. He's asking, what is the usage of the CPU and memory during searching of help? It's negligible. It's pretty much just a real quick text search within text files. It's based on the routing engine. The routing engine, even on the smaller devices of Junos, is relatively powerful. So you can go ahead and do a lot of searches, and I would expect to have almost no hit whatsoever. I mean, obviously, as soon as you press the enter key, there's going to be a slight spike but based on the CPU slice time that's used overall to the entire system, it's not much. Also understand, depending on the device that you're using, there is a separation between the control and the forwarding planes. So you still, even though you are using some CPU from the control side, you're not going to be impacting any traffic that's actually going through the box itself. A bit on the command structure. If this is basically showing when you're in configuration mode, and you type edit or configuration to get into that mode. While you're in that mode, you can go ahead and dive into deeper levels. Here we're showing an example of edit protocols RSTP interface down to one of the interfaces. Then if you look underneath that, you'll see a new stanza where in the brackets, you'll now see that effectively show up. What that means is you're at that level within the hierarchy itself. What's nice about this is you can dive into basically any level within the hierarchy that you want to be. You don't even have to have it configured originally. What does CD stand? All right, so David Carr is asking, what does CD stand for? CD basically is just making a reference to both change directory, like in Unix, or if you are in Windows, if you want to go ahead and just go ahead and migrate from one directory to another, you can just do CD, means change directory. So from this standpoint, it's analogous, edit is analogous to being able to go ahead and change within the hierarchy of the Junos command structure within the configuration. That's what this is providing an example for. So we have, it moves up one level, all right? So let's say here, if you do the up, yeah, as it shows, it'll move back up from the interface GIGI 12 back up to just edit protocols RSTP. The reason why you're not going from RSTP interfaces GIGI 12 to just RSTP interfaces is due to the fact that GIGI 0012 has to be defined. So while it's a child parent node of the interface, you still got, there are some requirements, and Junos will take that into account and factor it and bump up. So I've got a couple more questions I'm going to answer. Let me just finish this one slide and I'll answer those as soon as I'm done. So up to, effectively what that means is you can go up multiple levels as need be. So you could be very deep within the hierarchy. And if you know you want to go back exactly 3 or 4 levels, you can go up number. In this case, it's equivalent to what you're seeing as top. And this command does show that if you were to type top, it's going to go ahead and give you a warning that you're already at the top of the configuration. So you could have used either top or, in this case, up to, if you're to edit protocols RSTP or anywhere where you're 2 levels deep already, and you would have the equivalent. And then you just type exit to go ahead and get out. I have a question from Tamaz saying, is it possible to do Unix-style aliases? It is possible to do aliases. We're going to go ahead and get a little bit later into what's called Junos Automation. We'll cover that. In this case, that would be under op scripts. Junos scripts has a whole onboard scripting capability. You would always proceed everything with OP, but you can go ahead and write your own custom, very powerful aliases. It won't look transparent where you just type in the command, et cetera. We'll get into that in more detail later. So Tamaz, if you want, when we get to the Junos Automation section, please feel free to follow up with that question again, and I can provide even more detail when we get to that section. Command structure. All right, so as we were talking about earlier, we have a hierarchy, and you can see that hierarchy here. This is what I would call, it's not necessarily the natural layer of Junos, that's XML. This is more of a parsed layer that you're seeing out here, but this is the default that you'll see from a human standpoint, and it is, again, hierarchical. So from this standpoint, what we're seeing at the top level, system stanza, and then we're seeing other hierarchies underneath it, such as the host name, and then root authentication, which has additional stuff, login, services, etc. If you look at this, what you're basically going to notice is it's the hierarchy, everything, you know, has the open, closed bracket. From the standpoint of looking at it, you pretty much know where things start and where everything ends, what's related to that parent-child standpoint. And we have the set. All right. So this came out about 10 years ago at the request of lots of customers, especially coming from some, when they were coming from some other vendors. And so the way you can display the set commands is you're in a configuration, or from the regular Junos command line, you can do show configuration, and you can either do the whole thing or subsection, and then you pipe it out, display sets. This is what you'll see. It allows you to go ahead and just do line by line. A lot of folks, especially that are newer converts to Junos, like this style a lot more. And what it offers you is that familiarity where you don't have to do it this way if you prefer not to. Also, for those that do off-box coding, scripting, etc., this can offer a lot more natural ability to plug into your existing scripts. So the keystrokes. When you're using Junos, you can just simply use space bar or tab to go ahead and complete. So instead of just using kind of very verbose, somewhat cryptic commands that you may be used to, with Junos, it will always type it, spell it out completely for you, but you don't have to spell it out completely. You will have to spell it out enough where it will uniquely be able to identify it. If you don't spell it out enough, what it'll then do is it'll spit out what, hey, you know, out of what you have typed, there's 2 or 3 or 4 commands that match that, and which one do you want? And then it'll go ahead and tell you. And you know, you go ahead and you just type it out and complete it, and then you can press the tab or the space bar, and it'll just automatically go ahead and do it for you. So in this case, it's showing you at this top level right here. It's showing the show space, and it's automatically doing the show. And then the I space, it's saying it's ambiguous, and boom, it's showing 2, 4, 6 possible outputs, which all match an I. So which one would you like to select? You go ahead and complete that one. If in this case it was IPsec, you could just type IP, and it would automatically go ahead and finish that for you because that's the only one that matches. This will offer you a lot of time saving, but more importantly, it'll also allow a lot better readability as well if you're doing screen captures, etc. Operationally, you need to go ahead and log things. It makes a lot of follow-on so that you can read through things a lot simpler and a lot easier. So the magic question mark. The question mark is your friend. Feel free to use it. If you're not sure what to do, just seriously use the question mark. I use it all the time. Keystrokes, Emacs. Seems like you can never ever get away from those Emacs keys wherever you go. They're powerful and they're good. From this standpoint, what we're showing as the example is the triangle. That is where the cursor is. So at the top level where you see the cursor after the show interface, I'm sorry, not the cursor, the triangle. See the triangle after the show interfaces, that's where the cursor is right now. So if we were to use the Control B at the same time, we would just simply go back one space and it'll just now be underneath the S. We use Control A, we'll just go all the way to the beginning. Control F, you move forward one. Control E, go back to the end. Control R, looks like history search. Another one that's not in here is Control D, which is delete. A common one which I use a lot is maybe I'm going ahead and setting a command in a configuration. I do set interfaces, interface name, go ahead and do everything I need to do. Then suddenly I press enter and I go, oops, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. I can just simply press the up arrow key, hit Control A, hit Control D 3 times. That'll go ahead and delete it. Then just type in DEL, tab, and then go ahead and press enter again quickly, and I've deleted that out if that's what I wanted to do. It allows you to be able to quickly navigate and go back and forth on that one line as needed. So we're going to go ahead and talk about how the configuration works within Junos right now. So you have within Junos, you have an active and a candidate configuration. The active configuration, think of that as the running configuration. We go ahead and boot up the box. It's the one that's operational. It's basically the one that's running right now if you have not performed a commit as of yet. So you may have gone in and made changes into the configuration. You've gone into the configuration, you've done edit, you've made some changes, doesn't mean anything. You haven't committed it yet. The changes in effect are virtual at that point. By batch configuration model, what that means is you can make a whole bunch of changes at the same time, but they still haven't been applied to the system overall as a whole until you go ahead and decide to apply those changes via the commit model. What you've done is when you've gone into the configuration and you've made changes to the configuration hierarchy, you've effectively created a candidate configuration. As it says, it's a working copy of that configuration changes, and it will only become active once you make that commit. So here's a graphic that explains this in more detail. So you have the active configuration, which is 0. So if you're within the configuration, you can use the rollback command. Rollback 0 is basically what's going to be your active configuration. So let's say you're going ahead and you're making a whole bunch of changes, and you're like, oh, you know what? I need to get out of this. These changes aren't, either I can't do them now or I messed something up, and I just don't want these to be done. I don't want to go ahead and commit this. The thing is, if you were to exit out, what's going to happen right now is those changes are still going to be there. So you want to get rid of those changes, you can just simply do rollback 0. And that will go ahead and just roll it back to whatever the active is at that time. So the active configuration is 0. You've gone ahead and you've made changes, et cetera. You still haven't committed. You've now created a candidate configuration. It's there. And then you go ahead and type commit, enter, and Junos will go through, it'll check everything, it'll make sure everything's okay, and it will then make that candidate configuration the active configuration. And what used to be the active configuration 0, now from a file standpoint, gets saved as number 1. And everything goes, hierarchical 1 to up to number 49. So if you do 0 through 49, Junos saves up to 50 of its 49 of its previous configs with the one active config. So 50 configs are saved. So here's some helpful configuration commands. Rename. This is a great command. I've used it a whole bunch. I was actually using it last night for some stuff. You go ahead and you set something up and you realize, you know what, somebody plugged something into a different interface. You don't actually have to go in and either cut and paste or use a bunch of set commands, et cetera. You basically don't have to cut, put it in a notepad, make some changes, and then cut and paste back in. So what you can do is you can just jump right on a box and do exactly what the example here shows. Rename the interface to whatever. It's not just for interfaces. This is for anything within the Junos hierarchy level. You can go ahead and rename. It is excellent for making swaps changes as needed. It just allows a lot of flexibility. To replace pattern configuration command, I've used this a bunch. It's think of Control H if you're used to Notepad, Word, etc. It's the same as Control H. It's a search and replace. For those of you who like four-letter words like Unix, think of it as devise search and replace with the whole S find me, replace me /G, or instead substitute command. It's equivalent to that. What this allows you to do is, again, replace that pattern. You can be as specific or not as specific as you want. Now, understand that the less specific you are, the more it's probably going to match. What's nice about this is the replace command allows you to dive in from a configuration mode. It allows you to dive in to the hierarchy so you can edit into various sublevels and be more specific. So for instance, if you just only wanted to go ahead and replace, say, the MTU value of the interfaces, and that specific value might actually match other numbers within the global hierarchy, what you'd want to do is you want to do edit interfaces, and then you'd want to go ahead and do replace pattern, maybe that number, or maybe do MT, you want to do that number with whatever your new number is. And that'll go ahead and apply. A trick that I would recommend is if you know you're going to do large replacements and you may have possible matches in other parts of the hierarchy that are going to be the same, is to go ahead and take what's more specific and replace that with some kind of dummy number that is not the same anywhere else, and then save that number or text pattern, and then go ahead and make the change that you want, and then change the other stuff back. I don't know if that makes sense, but also what I'm trying to say is if you don't want too many things to be replaced because they might be similar, just make something that's more specific match, make it something that won't match anything, and then make the change that you want and then change it back. I've used this to go ahead and change subnet IPs. I've used it to, again, with MTUs especially. There's a lot of uses for this. I've also used it where line cards have been swapped out, where the line card has been pulled for whatever reason, put into another slot, just to very quickly, align all the interfaces to that new card, and almost just sometimes one command. The replace pattern can do that for you. Other thing to do is, let's say you've just simply changed something where that one interface has changed somewhere else, and it has a lot of appearances both at the interface, the protocol levels, maybe it's at OSPF, MPLS levels, et cetera. It might be under, virtual routers and the routing instances, et cetera. That one interface just shows up all over the place. You just want to change that one interface. This allows you to do this seamlessly and easily and quickly. Copy. This is a great command because effectively you can go ahead and have already configured. By the way, I've got a couple more questions. I'm going to go ahead and wait to answer those once I'm done with this slide. The copy, that allows you to go ahead and, as it's showing, copy, again, it's using interface as an example. This can be used anywhere within the hierarchy. You already have something you have created using an interface as an example. You may have already gone ahead and set up an interface which just pretty much has all the parameters that you want. Maybe the only thing you got to change is the IP address. So you can go ahead and copy that one interface to another interface that you want. And you can just, I think we'll show it later, yeah. Up at the top, you can then rename, from that new interface, you can rename the IP address. Don't rename the interface, but you can rename the IP address. So you could go ahead and copy the interface and then rename the IP address. In 2 commands, you can go ahead and copy a complex hierarchy order instead of having to cut, paste, put in a notepad, make your changes, and cut and paste again. It just makes it where it's a lot more user-friendly for being on box, a lot quicker. Deactivate. So what deactivate does, this is actually different than disable. So from the standpoint of disable is a configuration command, and it's mostly applied to interfaces. So if you were to disable an interface, you're actually shutting it down. By default with Junos, when you plug into an interface into the box, the actual interface is up by default. That way you can go ahead and tell in a file layer, everything's working back and forth. Everything's, from that file layer, that layer 1 connectivity at least, things are working as expected. But in disable, go ahead and shut that interface down. Deactivate, on the other hand, actually defaults it back, where you can have your configuration set up, but you deactivate that substanza. Effectively, what you've done is you've kept the configuration part of it within the Junos config, but it's deactivated. What that means is, from a system standpoint, it's not being programmed anywhere. The system doesn't know anything about it. It's literally deactivated. But you've kept it in the config. This is a really good tool for troubleshooting, for making changes, etc. I use it when I do POCs, or I'm at customer sites, etc. I use this actually rather extensively, especially when we're making quick changes, adds, deletes, etc. Or sometimes we just need to deactivate something to see what's going on. And the opposite of that is, well, activate. So as you see on the next line, you have deactivate interface GIGI 0010. Now you have activate interface 0010. Has the exact opposite effect. So the configuration that you had before that was now deactivated is now active. What that does is it now repopulates within the configuration. It then pushes, once you activate and commit, and again, each time you do the deactivate and activate, you have to commit. Do an activate.
Hi, it looks like Julian disconnected and he's dialing back in. Please stand by.
Hey, sorry about that. My call failed for some reason, and I've just dialed back in. So we were talking about the deactivate and the activate. So if you have deactivated something within the configuration, you can then go ahead and activate it again with the activate command. To go over it, I'm not quite sure if I broke up or not. Deactivate effectively keeps the configuration portion intact, but pulls the resources out of Junos. Once committed, those resources are not allocated to the system anymore. So each time you configure something, this is with any vendor, you go ahead and you take up resources within the system. What the deactivate command does is just make sure that those resources aren't then allocated anymore. The activate will then reverse that process and reconfigure the system. Insert. So you might have firewall policy, just regular policy, etc. In this case, it's using the policy as an example, and you have a specific priority of how you want the policy, the firewall, the rule to be evaluated. So one way to do this is to go ahead and use insert. The insert command allows you to go ahead and insert specifically within that hierarchy where you want that terms, that policy, the rule to go. And of course, you need to commit. In fact, with all of these, you would need to commit for them to take effect. My suggestion, obviously, is to do everything you need to do and then commit. So I've got a few questions. Let me go over them real quick. All right, so Adam asks, is there a way to undo the last set command without doing a rollback 0? Yeah, there is. I mean, the way you do your, so the one example that I used was if you did do a set command and you made a mistake, and this is something that I commonly do so much that it's kind of just wired in my brain, I can just do it, is just up arrow key, control, so you've just done this last set command, or you've done it a few times previously. Assuming it's in memory, you can just up arrow, and then you can just do control A, control D, delete, enter. That will delete that one set command for you. By the way, let me know if that answers your question or you're looking for more detail than that. Okay, got it. All right. And okay, so Adam also asks again, could you describe what control D does again? I can't seem to get it to do anything. So control D deletes. So what you need to do is if you're on the command, if you're in the Junos configuration right now, or actually it doesn't really matter, configuration or just normal Junos CLI, go ahead and just type something out, anything. Type out like at least where you have at least full structure, and then have it where your cursor's at the very end. And as an example, just press Control A so that you're at the beginning. And then at the same time, press Control D. And what you should see is you should see that where the cursor is, you should see that character be deleted. Okay, all right, you understand that, great. And Ahmed is asking, does deactivate activate need a commit command? Yes, it does, to take effect. So if you look within the Junos configuration hierarchy, you will see that it'll be deactivate : so wherever you actually do that deactivation, and you can do it pretty much at any level within the Junos configuration hierarchy, it's not specific. You can do it at a top level hierarchy, or you can be very, very granular and very, very precise. You'll see it proceeded with a deactivate : next to the command, and then everything underneath that one section is deactivated. For that to take effect, you need to do commit. And then once it's committed and deactivated, if you want to reverse that, then you'll have to go ahead and do activate, again, whatever that command structure hierarchy is, again, commit. And that will then reverse it. But you won't see activate. You'll just simply see normal configuration after that. Yeah, so again, Ahmed's asking, is that equal to just shut, no shut in another vendor? Not really. So again, one of the things I was trying to explain is, so if you want the equivalent of shut, no shut, from an interface standpoint, you would use disable, which is actually a configuration command. So you do like set interface name disable, and that would actually shut down the interface itself. So if you were to look at the outside LED light, it would end up being red. The other end of the link would basically show a link down. What the deactivate does is it just pulls out the configuration itself, so that the resources that were allocated are no longer there in the system. Effectively, it's just not configured anymore. So from that standpoint, from the interface for the interface, it would actually still be up. And so you'd still have that phi layer. So the other side would go ahead and recognize it, but there would be nothing configured from the Junos standpoint, because that using an interface as an example is deactivated. So there is a slight difference. If you actually want to do no shut, which basically means, or shut no shut, which means you want to bounce the link, or just simply disable the link, use the disable command. If you want to go ahead and unconfigure it, use the deactivate command if you still also want to leave in that configuration portion. And another question from Adam. I often use insert to properly order the interface under VLAN, VLAN name interface, because Junos does not order them. Is there a way to make it order, or how can I request this feature? Yeah, so I assume what you're asking then is there a way to order the VLAN name itself? Yeah, so Junos looks at it as it's kind of a first come, first served based on how you type it, else you're going to have to insert it. It's not going to put it in any kind of alphabetical or hierarchical order. If what I would suggest is if you want that as a feature, then please work with your account team, your sales team. They can work with you to go ahead and align that with the proper resources within Juniper and put in that request for you. Right now, though, if you want to go ahead and place that in order, the best way to do it in bulk probably wouldn't be to do it one by one insert. The insert command is good if you just need to, if you're quickly configuring something and you want to go ahead and insert it as need be. If you have something like tens or dozens or hundreds of structures underneath that you need to go ahead and have ordered a specific way, typically what I've seen customers do that is either they have their own off-box scripts that do it, or they're going to use some kind of off-box magic to do it for them. So that can be managed. Because a lot of the times that's also unique to the customer's requirements. It might be alphabetical, it might be alphanumeric order, but it also could be a completely different order. It really depends on what the customer's needs are and how they want to go ahead and categorize that. And I'm getting an example. I'm getting someone who's asking for an example of pattern replacement. Well, actually, right here, if you actually look at this slide, the second one where it says replace a pattern of configuration statements. So the pattern itself in this case is GE-0/0/10. That just happens to be the pattern that's used, which happens to be an entire interface name. And it's effectively, it's just replacing it with GIGI-0010 to GIGI-00/11. You can make that pattern anything you want. So you can make it as fine, you can make it as detailed or not as detailed. Just understand that whatever it matches, it's going to search and it's going to replace. Again, one of the things you can do is you can be granular with this. So you can go to a sub-level and apply this, which means that only within that sub-level and below will that pattern be searched and replaced. So you don't need to do this at the global level. In fact, my recommendation is you don't. If you know exactly where this needs to be applied, go to that specific level within the Junos configuration hierarchy and apply that search and replace. Please let me know if that answers your question regarding the pattern replacement. And David's asking, so insert just organizes your configuration. Basically, yeah, that's what it really does. It allows you, like if you have terms and, well, it organizes, but also allows it where in certain ways for evaluation, how something would be evaluated. But other folks also use it for organization, for readability, etc. So let me know if that answers your question, David. All right. So we've already been talking about configurations and how you have to commit it, that effectively you have your active and candidate configs. Your candidate config is, again, a review. It's what you have your active config, you boot up, your active config, that's what's going to be running on your router. So just think of whatever's actively running right now, that is your active config. When you go into the Junos CLI, when you go into the Junos configuration and do a show, what you're going to show is your active config before any changes are made. And as you make changes, that becomes your candidate config, but it still is not active. To make that active, you have to go ahead and type commit. Now, my suggestion, and this is based on a lot of experience, not just from me, but a lot of our customers, a lot of other folks that I've worked with that have done Junos, and it's also one of the powers of Junos is you can check that configuration before you actually commit it. You can do that with the commit check command. What this allows you to do is it allows you to verify that everything's okay before you do it. And if there is an issue, it'll spit it out. Would you normally see, if there's an error especially, would you see this anyway? Yes, you would. You would actually see this no matter what, because before a commit occurs, a commit check occurs. But it kind of allows you to be proactive and make a choice. Okay, I've done a commit check, everything looks okay. All right, cool, now I'll do a commit. And I highly recommend that customers just ingrain themselves to do a commit check first. Just check your, it's kind of having a second or third person looking over your shoulder, making sure everything's okay, the system does it. Another value with commit check is it's a lot faster in the way it processes. So if you have a large configuration and you've had a lot of changes that are made, when you go ahead and push those changes to the system, you might have an error in it and you do a commit, but it can take a while before it spits out. And by that, I mean, now with modern day REs, and by modern day, I'm talking about anything made in the last 5, 6, 7 years, in Juniper, typically even, hundreds and hundreds of changes will be processed super quick. It'll be done in 10, 20 seconds at the most. And typically you're talking about maybe just a few seconds. But with larger configs, especially on the service provider side, where I have seen configurations in ranges of 25 to 50 megs, where you have tens of thousands of lines, they can take multiple minutes because the system goes through and it parses everything, and it looks at everything, makes sure everything's done. And as it checks that one section, and then it goes ahead and pushes out those changes. So the way the changes are done is when a commit occurs, is Junos kind of takes a snapshot where, okay, this is what was there, this is what is new. What are the changes that need to occur? Okay, these are the changes. I need to go ahead and reconcile those changes. And then I'm going to go ahead and push out to the system what those changes are, effectively reallocating or allocating new resources as needed within the system itself. So that can take a little bit of time. The one thing that's good about the commit check is it doesn't do any of that stuff. It just simply checks the configuration against the database. And it just does this quickly. So what might have taken, let's say a 25, 50 meg, I'm using that specifically as an example because it can take a long time. It can save you multiple minutes. And sit there and spit out, hey, this is wrong, or hey, you need to check this. There's a little warning here. You know what, there's a little notice here. You might want to look at this because it doesn't quite make sense. Commit confirmed. This has been an absolute lifesaver for me personally, and I think for many other people that know about it and have used it. So what commit confirmed does is, have you ever had one of those, you've been up at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning, you're making some change, you're kind of sleepy, and, especially with ACLs, okay? Or it's for, let me use a proper Junos term, firewall filters. You're making your changes, and you don't really, you haven't drunk enough coffee. And suddenly you just make that change, and you press enter, and in this case, you commit, and all of a sudden it's like, oops. Things just stop responding. And oh, by the way, this remote site, which maybe is located in a different country, just so happens doesn't have out-of-band management. So commit confirmed, what that allows you to do is you can type commit confirmed, and by default it's 10 minutes. If you don't follow up and type a commit after that, within that time frame or whatever you define it to be, it will automatically roll back to the previous working configuration. This has literally saved me a number of times, especially when I've done some professional services work in the past, where I have, whether I'm at work or working at my house, it doesn't really matter where I'm at, but I'm logged into, say, a customer's router that might be located, say, Germany or on the East Coast of the United States. Doesn't really matter where it is. There's no way I'm going to get there at any time soon, and they may or may not have that remote access capability. So the commit confirmed just allows it where you don't have to make that call and I say, hey, can you please reboot that box, or can you please have somebody log in and do the rollback for me. That's what the commit confirmed does. My recommendation is you don't need to do commit confirmed because it's defaults to 10. I usually do commit confirmed space 2. That means 2 minutes. What that does is it'll roll back within 2 minutes. Again, this depends on the size of your config and how long it would normally take to commit. But typically, the reason why I do 2 is because 1, you get warnings every minute. If you do commit confirmed 1, you're really just not going to get no warning. The first warning is just going to automatically roll back. So you might have it where you do commit confirm 2, someone grabs your attention, and then within a minute, it'll spit up a message saying, hey, you need to roll back. Or I'm sorry, this is going to roll back if you don't do a commit. I've got some questions. Let's see. So what is the effect of 2 commit confirm commands within different times? They just override themselves. If you do commit confirmed once, they do commit confirmed again, it's just another commit confirmed. The other commit confirmed gets canceled out. One question is, how can you change the default time frame? I assume that's for commit confirmed. So again, you just, and David, let me know if I'm incorrect, but effectively it's commit confirmed space number. Okay, yeah. And again, my recommendation is just at least give yourself 1 or 2 minutes of leeway. I think the commit confirmed 10 is a long time. The reason why I say that, I got out of that habit quickly because, again, especially doing greenfield stuff where a lot of times the mistakes can happen, I just left the default, and then I'm kind of drinking coffee for the next 6 or 7 minutes waiting for it to roll back, and then I log in. So I quickly just use 2 or 3 as my number. What about commit from another session? Will it commit my configuration? Yes, it will. It will. So basically, in fact, anyone who would be logged into the configuration mode would actually see that message spit out to the screen. And someone's saying to raise the sound volume. Please let me know if this is better for you. If anyone else is having a problem hearing me, please let me know. So I guess a tip from Adam is you can confirm your previous commit confirm by using commit check. This doesn't waste a rollback slot. Okay, you know what? I didn't actually know that. Typically the action I've always done is commit check, then commit confirmed, then commit. So if that's the case, that's a good tip. And a question from Craig. Sometimes there's a config that needs to be committed before other commands can be taken. Commit check errors out, but if you know it will work doing one at a time, can you commit both at the same time? So let me read that again. Sometimes there is a config that needs to be committed before other commands can be taken. Commit check errors out, but if you know it will work doing one at a time, you can commit both at the same time. So Greg, are you saying that you've made changes, effectively done the equivalent of a commit check or commit, and it's errored out, and I guess could you provide more detail on what you mean by, but if you know it will work doing one at a time, can you commit both at the same time? Can you add more detail for that? And then maybe I can answer the question more completely. So additional configuration commits. So you can also schedule commits. You see this sometimes with change control windows where they've gone ahead and already parsed the configurations they want. You know, whether it's because they scripted it, they labbed it up, et cetera. You know, this might be a common change, just, you know, a new customer, they already know this, it's well proven out, not a big deal. They want to activate it within this time window. So you can do commit at this time. And then at that time, and obviously based on the time zone that the box is set at, it will go ahead and commit the configuration. Another thing you can do is add comments. A lot of customers like this. Usually they'll have some kind of style that they go ahead and input. Sometimes it's both either off box or on box scripted. That'll also add this type of stuff. But effectively, you can add an actual comment itself so that when you go ahead and look at the previous configurations that are stored and archived, you can see, you know, brief, you know, this is what was done, this is what was done, this is what was done, maybe this is what was done, why, by who, etc. Show system commit. That then effectively the show system commit will actually go ahead and show that. Looks like, okay, I'm getting back in. All right, cool. So show system commit. All right, I got 10 minutes, folks, so I'm going to start speeding it up. Use commit and quit to save time, and as it says, if you just want to commit and you want to quit, type commit and quit. And I appear to be having some issue where I can't. So, hey, Julie, or Sarah, could you guys go ahead? Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So you want to back out of the configuration change. So you made some changes, and you know you're basically like, you know what? I made some mistakes. I need to get out of this. You can use rollback. What's really nice, and by the way, when it says the last 50 previously, effectively it's 0 to 49. So really, it's the last 49 with 0 as the active. So rollback. So effectively, rollback 0 just resets it to the active configuration. And rollback 1 loads to previous one, rollback N is the next previous one, et cetera. What's nice also is you can do a diff between those different rollbacks to see what those changes were or are. And you can then go, okay, you know, I know what was changed here, and I can go ahead and roll back to that area that I need. When you do a rollback, obviously, you need to also commit. Could you do the next slide, please? Saving the configuration. So you can go ahead and save. You have the file name, save the file name, this save file name. This is from the configuration mode, obviously. You can also go ahead and export that to a URL. Whether that's FTP and STP. And by the way, when it says file name can specify, the command that you're using, save file name, is basically a path or a file name. Let's see. Yeah, so there's actually an example to display set a little bit lower that we'll get to. So I'll show that to you. The next slide, please. Loading configurations. There's a lot of different ways to load the configuration in. You could use, say, if you display set, you can then just go ahead and cut and paste that. You can also have the legacy Junos configuration style, which is a hierarchical. And then from there, you can just go ahead and load that in. So load override, what that effectively does is it overrides the entire configuration. So whatever you had on the box, if you use load override and then what you now put into the configuration, whether it's from a local file, a terminal, remote, doesn't really matter where it's sourced from, you're going to blow away whatever you had. What merge does is exactly what it says. It merges those two together. Replace, it'll basically, it's like a merge, but then it replaces. So what that basically means is it will replace anything that's the same and override it, but it won't touch anything that's not the same. What that basically means is if it'll do a diff between the two, and anything that matches, it'll automatically replace. What doesn't match, it'll just leave alone. And the fourth bullet, taking input from terminal capture buffer, this is just showing the different ways you can do it. So you can do load, whether it's replace, merge, or override from the terminal. So from that respect, you can go ahead and again, terminal, what that means is from the root, from the top level, from the of the hierarchy. What that basically means is you can cut and paste. From this standpoint, what it's saying is from the legacy Junos, that's the hierarchy version of it. If you're using the display set command, which basically shows set, command, set, etc., you don't need to use this. You can just cut and paste that directly in, just like you're typing it in. And then the load terminal, the load relative equivalent is, the load relative, For relative, what that means is if you're in the sub-hierarchical level, so let's say you went ahead and, you made a whole bunch of interface changes and you got a fresh set that you basically, your whole interface's sub-stanza layer is completely different. So you just do edit interfaces, and then you can just do load, replace. Actually, first you probably want to delete that interface's hierarchy, then do load, replace, terminal, relative, and then press enter, and then it'll sit there and have a little thing that says, hey, press Control D when you're done, go ahead and cut and paste. You cut and paste that in. Once you're done in new space, you press Control D. What relative means is it's relative to the hierarchical level. And again, you need to commit. Next slide, please. So what this is showing right here is we've done a few changes in the candidate config, and then we want to go ahead and see what those changes and differences are. So if you're at all familiar with the Unix diff, this is exactly what the output is. What's really nice about this is it can actually be used as a patch to import and make changes to the Junos configuration. So the minus obviously means that's what's taken away. The plus means that's what's been added. And it will also show you at what hierarchical level. So in this case, we're seeing this all under Edit System Services. So any changes, et cetera, that were made will be displayed like this. Next slide, please. And we were talking about before how you have the different saved previous configs. So in this case, you have the different rollbacks. So if you want to see what those changes are, you can just do show configuration. And then you can do compare the rollback number, or you can also, again, look at a local file name if you want to. You can also go ahead and compare multiple file names as well within the file system. And the output is going to be the same diff format that you saw previously. Next slide, please. So you can type configure at the CLI operational mode. That will get you into configuration mode. Once you're in configuration mode, you will go from that little bracket, the little right-facing arrow to the pound sign. If you want to go ahead and make it where you are the only one who can configure, nobody else can jump in, There was a previous question about this, like, hey, what happens, I think, if two people do the commit confirmed at the same time. I mean, one way you can actually have it where you're the only one doing it is your commit, you configure exclusive. What that basically means is nobody else can go ahead and do it. You have locked down the configuration database. Nobody else can get in there. The difference between configure exclusive and configure private is effectively configure private is, again, as it says, you have your own private copy of that candidate config. So basically what it means is multiple people can go ahead and do this at the same time. And then each time someone goes and does a commit, it'll merge that together. Now, when that's done, you may have, typically the way this is done in customer sites is a lot of times you have it where, you know, one group might be responsible for one section, another one's responsible for another section of the config. So they don't overstomp each other. But if they were to go ahead, the one who does it the latest is the one who wins. It's kind of like it's just kind of the way it works. First come, first serve. Next slide, please. Configuration groups. So think of configuration groups as kind of a static macro. By that I mean a macro would normally, you can unroll it and you can program a macro. In this case, you're not really programming per se. It's just, it's a static capability. The examples here aren't really showing I think the full power of macros where you can do matching, what I would call kind of poor man's regex style matching in it, which actually can be very, very powerful because it allows you to, remember I was talking about that problem with the MTUs before and we were doing some of the replace pattern with it. Well, you can go ahead and actually bypass that by putting, if you know what your MTUs should be or typically would be, you can go ahead and make a group for that and apply that one single group then to, say, the interfaces level or to certain interfaces based on what you want to set up. But you can do that from one section, and all you have to then do is change that one area. Kind of think of this as a subroutine in a way that gets called from some other section within Junos. So you'll see applied groups. So in this case, set applied groups, which is at the top level hierarchy. So what this does is Junos will see it and go, okay, I see this. This is my group. I'm going to refer to it. And I look at it and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I see RE1. This is what I'm going to do. So in this case, RE0 and RE1 are well-known names. So if you happen to have two REs within the system, or with the first RE, which is RE0, so logical first one, will be assigned this out-of-band management interface. And then the second one, which is RE1, the logical second one, which is RE1, will be assigned this IP address automatically. Next slide, please. Interface group example. Good, excellent. So this is showing some of the matching capabilities. Again, there is more capability to this. But here in this case, it's showing ATM interfaces. AT-star basically means all ATM interfaces. So wherever you decide to apply this group, so set interface apply groups. So effectively, this is set under the interfaces stanza. So it would cover all ATM interfaces. So all ATM interfaces would inherit these parameters. And you can be as discrete as you want. So you can also be specific down to interface names themselves if you want. Next slide, please. Trace options. So for those of you who like debugging, trace options is an extraordinarily powerful tool. Now understand that it's done based on the control planes. It is done on the CPU. It does not affect forwarding. Depending on how you use it, the general rule is try to be as specific as possible. So if you happen to be, say, a service provider customer and you have, and I have seen this up to, even 100 BGP peers, don't go and set trace options at the global BGP level and then flag all. because you're going to get so much stuff that when you don't need, it's also that will cause the CPU to spike quite a bit, because you're effectively tracing down at the lowest level of debug capability for 100 peers, which basically means it's logging everything. More than likely, you've only got a problem on one peer, and maybe it's multiple. What you do is you do the trace options based. I would recommend doing it on those peers themselves. What's also nice about that is you can also name those trace option files specifically based on those peers. I'm using BGP as an example just because I have seen a couple of customers on the service provider side who have gotten in trouble with this. It's been a while. Some of the older CPUs had a problem. I think the newer CPUs could even handle that kind of stuff now. But at the same time, the general rule of thumb is just try to be as specific as possible. I'm using OSPF here as an example. From an OSPF standpoint, just because it has that single database, you can't go ahead and trace option based on areas. It's at the top level. So in this case, I purposely changed the MTU at the IP layer on each side, one from 9,000, another one at 8,900, just to go ahead and cause an issue where it was stuck in X start state. You can kind of especially with OSPF, if you see X start, usually it's going to be an MTU issue. If you're not sure what the other side is, you can use trace options. So from this standpoint, I flagged normal. I didn't show what the normal here is. The normal just shows what the normal state going back and forth is. It's actually not a whole lot of information. And really, if you want to see what's with the MTU, you have to do packets. So from this so here we go ahead and say, hey, look, I've done run show OSPF enable. I'm in X start state. Not really sure what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and enable trace options. Here's also an example of show pipe display set. So instead of showing what I would call the hierarchical version of the Junos configuration, we're showing the set version right here. And this is a snippet of the actual OSPF trace options log. I've named this log. I specifically just said 1 meg in size for each file, 10 files each, no world readable, which just basically means only I'm going to be able to read it, or anyone who's root access can read it. Also understand that when it says 1 meg inside and 10 files, this is circular. What that means is if all the files, all 10 are used, and they're all meg each, and by the way, the old ones get compressed, they get gzipped. It'll basically overwrite the old one. It'll just continuously do that. It's not like it'll suddenly stop. And you can make these files pretty big. I've seen some customers make them 100 meg, and I've seen some customers go up to even 50 files if needed. Depending on the system that you can get systems that have up to 40, 50, 60 gig hard drives on them. So there's a lot of room. Plus, again, the old files are archived. It is text, and a lot of this text is the same. So the compression can be quite large. So if you look here, what's highlighted in red is you go ahead and see that our side is MTU 9000, and hey, we're receiving 8900 from the other side. Okay, it looks like some folks have to drop off, and this actually really is the last, one of the last slides. So we're going to go ahead and do a random drawing for, so we have 5 books left, and Julie or Sarah, if you guys want to take over from that standpoint, or you want me to do it, let me know.
After the webinar ends, I'll go ahead and draw the names and send out an email to all of you. So if you've entered your first and last name in when you logged in, we should be able to get your email address from that. So you can go ahead and finish up.
Okay. So there's, go ahead to next slide. So the ability to go ahead and monitor the interface commands, show active traffic to the interface. So basically monitor interface traffic. This allows you to see in real time what's going in and out of the box. You have various outputs. The default is going to show you PPS. Delta is just simply what the delta was before. It really only makes sense when you're looking at bytes. Bytes, by the way, is bits per second, not large B. but small b. That's really where the delta kind of makes sense. Everything else to delta really kind of just matches whatever you see for input output because it's an actual delta being captured. This is a great monitoring tool, and it's actually used extensively by customers both to troubleshoot as well as verify what's going on and where it's going on. So let's go. I don't know. I'm going to try and go as quickly as I can through Junos Automation. I think it's quite valuable. So go ahead, next slide, please. Next slide. So we have Junos Automation. What is automation within Junos? It's the ability to automate. It's the ability to allow you, customers, to focus on that service creation. You know, basically just allow you to not have to focus so much on the typical daily operational aspects, but instead on service creation, the ability to go ahead and get things done as seamlessly as possible. Go to the next slide. Next slide, please. So Junos Automation, you have various capabilities in how you can do this and how you can interface and interact with the system. You can access it via tunnels over SSH-v2, XML. You can also have RPC requests and responses. Go to the next slide. And you know what, we don't have time, so go to the next slide, please. Okay, so this is what it looks like from an operational standpoint. If you were to go ahead and do a pipe command, show VLANs, display, in this case, XML RPC, you'll go ahead and see the RPC command, this one RPC get-VLAN-information. Effectively, if you were to go ahead and write and program your own scripts, that is the command that you would use. That's the RPC command that you would use. And then if you do the show VLANs, pipe, display, XML, this effectively shows you from, this is actually natively how Junos interacts with the configuration. So when you're actually looking at the Junos configuration output, whether it's the hierarchical command syntax or the set output, it's just a translation of this. So XML is the actual natural format that it's stored in. And what's nice is you can see that natural format, but you can also interact with it directly, which allows extraordinarily powerful automation capability. Next slide, please. So what it's showing here is the CLI version equivalent and then the XML output equivalent. What it's trying to show here is that there is a one-to-one mapping based on the CLI commands and then the XML output that's programmable. Go ahead, next slide. So netconf. Netconf is an API that's been developed. Well, actually, netconf actually is a standard that's been developed, and Junos follows that standard. So what that allows is it allows very powerful set of tools so that you can go ahead and interact with that Junos box back and forth, and you can apply those changes as needed in a programmable and systematic way. Next slide, please. This is showing the state machine of how things would be done in an automation standpoint. Next slide, please. All right. And Junos on-box automation. This is basically when you hear of Junos scripting or on-box scripting, this is what it's talking about. There are different ways. You have off-box and you have on-box. What we were showing previously actually can be applied to either. So when you see the XML parsing, et cetera, that is on-box or off-box, depending on how you want to go ahead and view it. That's why it was shown first, because in effect, it's neutral from Junos' standpoint. So from an on-box, so someone had actually asked about aliases. That would be, if you look in the middle, operations automation. That's what OnBox allows you to do. You can go ahead and create these op scripts. The command would be preceded by OP space, whatever the name is. You'd have to have the script on the box itself in a special directory. And you'd want to test it out, make sure everything works. It'll spit out an error if it doesn't. But you have three different styles of on-box automation. You have configuration, you have automation, you have operations, you have event. So configuration, effectively, it allows you to, it's exactly what it sounds like, configuration and commit. So for instance, if you want something that kind of is that second or third eye to double check, make sure that certain things you always want to have within your configuration are there. You can add that with your configuration automation script. It could make absolutely sure that maybe certain parameters are there. Maybe you have certain interface config. Another thing you can also do is if they're not there, it can also add it for you. So it can do a double check. It can do actual multiple things. It can also spit out messages, do follow-ups, etc. Operations automation. Think of that as aliases. Let's say you're showing the output of certain commands, and it's just not enough. You'd like to roll together multiple outputs that just aren't there. You can do that with an operations. You can actually create custom output with operations automation. And event automation, effectively, what it does is an event occurs that's triggered, and you'll go ahead and a script can be kicked off based on that event. What's nice about that is it can actually kick off configuration and operations automation scripts simultaneously. By the way, for the events that Juniper has, you can do a help syslog question mark. There's, I think, over 2,000 of them now. It's nicely categorized. So for those of you who are on the Junos box right now, just do from the normal Junos CLI, help space syslog space question mark. And you'll see all the different events that Junos goes ahead and can be triggered from an automation. And on top of that, there's some manuals in automation. We have some links later on that will show you. There is a guide that shows you how to actually create your own custom events based on parameters. Like you can go ahead and have it where the log files are searched, and based on that log file, an event could actually be triggered within the system to go ahead and do something. Next slide, please. Yeah, so operations automation. Create custom commands for a specific solution user needs. Exactly what it's saying here. So in this case, it's using an example. So think this is somewhat, not necessarily an alias, but a custom actual output that's being shown. Opters int customer acme. You just want to see that customer acme. This probably is being matched on something like the interface name in a description or something. So obviously you have to have certain style that's set up to make sure that some of these scripts are going to work as expected. But it more than likely is searching through. I haven't seen the script, so I don't know, but my expectation is probably matching on this interface description. But it'll go ahead and just nicely show only that name. You don't have to go ahead and do a whole lot of stuff to find that one specific customer. Next slide, please. Configuration automation. Yeah, so one of the things I was talking about, the assure compliance to business rules and policies. What that really means is you have set up programmably certain criteria must be met before the commit is allowed. A lot of our customers use this. It has saved a number of customers where, for whatever reason, someone's accidentally fat-fingered something where they've deleted a protocol. For whatever reason, they just accidentally deleted OSPF. With configuration automation, you can set it up where that's not allowed. It can either self-correct it, or it can just simply spit out an error message or a warning message and say, hey, this has happened. Are you sure you want to do this? Yes or no? Or based on the rules, this is not allowed. Next slide, please. Actually, no, go back to the previous slide. So with the configuration automation, another thing you can also do is you can create your own custom syntax and commands. So I talked about groups before and how they're not really macros because they're not programmable. Macros technically should be programmable. You know, while they can do a bunch of matching, et cetera, here with configuration automation, you do have that full-blown macro capability. You can actually go ahead and set it up where you could have your own custom syntax version where you could set it up where, hey, you know, customer name, various parameters, you know, IP address, description, maybe a couple other parameters, boom. And then everything that needs to be, or maybe, you know, service level, bronze, et cetera, boom, boom, boom. And then it'll automatically go ahead and program MPLS. It'll automatically go ahead and set up that interface. It'll automatically go ahead and do all these things for you based on 3, 4, 5, 6 parameters that you put in. That can also be done with configuration automation. We have a lot of customers that do that. It's quite powerful. Next slide, please. Event automation. Yeah, again, it's showing here, yeah, SNMP trap link down. For those of you that are in the Junos box, I suggest doing help space fifth log space SNMP underscore trap underscore link underscore down. That should show you a description. By the way, I'm not in a Junos box right now, so if I am misquoting that, please let me know. That should show you a detailed output of what you can do with that command, what it means, et cetera, to the system. So from this regards, you can set up a script that looks for the SNMP trap link down event, and based on, you know, how you've set that up, it'll do something. It's an event, and that event will trigger something. It'll trigger whatever you want it to do within the system. Next slide. Okay, yeah, resources. So here's some resources. We have day one books. These are excellent books. They're free to download. I highly suggest using them. They go from basic to advanced. You know, they have like just basic operational Junos all the way to setting up BGP VPNs and even advanced SRX firewalls in, you know, large scale deployments. We have an online support community where you can ask questions. A lot of folks from within Juniper are on that forum, and they will answer your questions for you there. And then, of course, Junos Automation. 2 main links, one from Juniper, which is just juniper.net/automation. From there, you'll see a lot of the stuff with the event operational commit, as well as links to tutorials, what's going on, et cetera. And then there is an external on the Google Code site called the Junos Scriptorium. If you can't quite remember this whole link, you can just type in Junos Scriptorium on Google. It'll take you right to it. The reason why I put the source browse trunk library there is because if you go right to Junos Scriptorium, it's not always intuitive how to get into the version repository. Here, it'll automatically take you also to the latest version that's committed within a library. And there's a whole lot of stuff there. There's hundreds upon hundreds of scripts there. It is a great place to both peruse for anything you're not sure of. Maybe it's already been written, and you can get it there, as well as a great learning tool. And again, my contact information, Julian Eccli, just je@juniper.net. If I have not been able to answer your question, or you have further additional questions, especially since we're out of time, in fact, we're over time, please feel free to contact me, and I will, as quickly as possible, follow up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julian, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar. Please note that today's presentation has been recorded and will be available on the Juniper website within the next few business days. That concludes today's event. You may now disconnect.